Hey, if you're watching this video, I can imagine that you are struggling with unwanted and probably disturbing thoughts. Now, these thoughts could be of a violent nature, of a sexual and socially unacceptable nature, anything that really disturbs you and that you don't want to be thinking and that you can't get rid of. And if this is you, first things first, I want you to know that you're not alone. It may feel like you're alone. It may feel very isolating and very embarrassing and scary, but the truth is millions of people have experiences like what you're experiencing right now, and what you're experiencing are most likely what we call intrusive thoughts. And I know this from personal experience, my own personal moments of terror, I should say. And what I want you to know is that there's definitely hope. You're not going crazy. You're not losing your mind. It's almost certain that you're not going to do the things that you're afraid you're going to do, and that those thoughts are really just thoughts, and that they're not going to be something that dominates your life in the long haul. What I want to do in this video is I want to, first of all, share my story about intrusive thoughts and help you to understand where I'm coming from and just the depth of what these things can do. And I want to share some strategy that you can use right away to begin getting some relief from these kind of thoughts that you might be having. And I also want to share a resource that's so powerful. Honestly, like, you'll read like the first chapter of this resource and you'll be like, oh my God, like, thank God. I'm not crazy. I'm not losing my mind. It's not the end of the world after all. I'm going to be okay. And it's going to be like the greatest relief just to have this resource. I'm going to share that with you as well in this video. So first things first, just to kind of give you an idea where I came from. In 2014, mid-2014, I had like a very intense spiritual awakening that was coupled with like a manic high of sorts, a psychological intense experience. And what happened was that my psychology following this experience was very altered, and I just wasn't in my normal state of mind. And so the types of thoughts that I was having were different than what I was used to. And I happened upon some experiences where suddenly I started having these weird, potentially violent thoughts. And they were thoughts like, what if I harmed somebody? And specifically, I was thinking about, what if I harmed somebody close to me who I really care about, like my fiance at that time, my now wife. And at first, I kind of tried to ignore them and push them aside, and they would go away. I'd get busy with other things, and they would kind of go away. But then they started to get stronger and stronger. And it was almost like a Chinese finger trap. Like, the worse they got, the more I tried to pull out, and the harder I tried to pull my mind out of these thoughts, the harder that Chinese finger trap just held on to me, so I couldn't get out, and my mind could not escape, and it would come back harder and stronger and more terrifying. And it got so bad that I was literally freaking out, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I was ashamed, I was embarrassed. I remember crying and feeling like I was literally losing my mind and everything was falling apart. And I ended up having a moment. I told my fiance about this, and she thought it was just, it's going to something that's going to pass. It's no big deal. But I remember a moment where it got so bad. I was standing in the kitchen. I still remember this moment, and I said, okay, I'm having these terrifying, violent thoughts. I don't want them. I don't know what to do with them. They won't go away. And I'm going to just have to take myself in. I'm just going to have to admit myself somewhere, a psych ward or whatever, because this is bigger than me. There's nothing I can do to stop this on my own. And it's really funny because after doing that, oddly enough, I don't remember for how long afterward, but for quite some time afterward, it was like these thoughts kind of lifted, and I felt like some major relief. And I think it was because like I just really surrendered and let go and said, look, whatever it's going to take, whatever it takes to process this, I don't care. I'm not that ashamed that I'm not going to get help if I need help or whatever. And that really brought some relief. But I want you to know it did not bring the cure. It did not solve my problem. That came later. Now, fortunately, at this time, I was working with a meditation coach who was very intuitive and did a little bit of research because she knew what was going on. And she found some work by a guy named Martin N. Seif. And he had an article about intrusive thoughts. And I read this article and I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I'm going through. And it was like almost word for word verbatim the experience I was having. And it like showed me that I wasn't alone and that there was hope, there was process for this, and I could get out of it. And eventually I started to kind of dig into that, and I'll explain some of my strategy and well, not my strategy, but the strategy I learned, the process I learned to help get rid of these intrusive thoughts. But first I want you to kind of understand a little bit about what intrusive thoughts are, how they work, and how your mind works in this way, so that you can understand a little bit more why this is happening to you. So first things first, let's do something kind of funny. You don't have to actually follow this all the way through, but if I was to say to you right now, for the next 5 minutes, 5 full minutes, don't picture carrots. Don't think the word carrot, don't picture a carrot. And every time that you think about a carrot, you have to start over and go back to 0 and try to get to 5 minutes. Well, the truth is, like, the vast majority of people would not be able to accomplish that task. In fact, they think about carrots 100 times and they just keep having to start over and whatever. And this is sort of the ironic aspect of the mind. Okay. Now, imagine this. What if I replace the carrot with something that you are appalled by, that scares you, that scares the living daylights out of you, that sort of represents the opposite of what you want to be as a human being, and that maybe is socially unacceptable and that you would be ostracized for or whatever. And I say, okay, don't think about that. Don't picture yourself doing that thing, whatever that thing is, for 5 minutes. Okay? And imagine that your mind just happens to be oversensitized to that specific thing already. Okay? Now you kind of understand the stickiness and the stickiness of mind that goes along with intrusive thoughts, because intrusive thoughts are essentially an ironic aspect of the mind. The mind is ironically reacting to content that is very repugnant to it. Now, it's really important to understand what I mean by that, because what I'm basically saying is that the things that you're afraid of in intrusive thinking, that I might do something really violent or terrible, like I was afraid I would harm my fiance with a knife, for example. I had this horrible image in my mind. The things that you're so terrified of are essentially representing the opposite of who you actually are in that moment. Okay? And that's why you're reacting so strongly to it. You're oversensitized to the content relative to the typical person who just wouldn't care as much about that, wouldn't be thinking so much about that. They're not so sensitized to it. So it's the opposite. And what that means is that you're not a monster. You're not some crazy psycho person. You're not a sicko. You're not whatever you think you might be because of these thoughts. You're actually the opposite. But it feels like you are these things because you can't get rid of these thoughts. Okay? And to understand why this plays out, or kind of really the nitty-gritty of how it plays out, it's really helpful to understand that what you really have going on is you can see my fingers here, 3 aspects of the mind, or 3 minds actually playing out in your head that are contributing to some aspect of the intrusive thought experience, 2 of which are making it worse. So the first mind number 1, is what's called worry mind. And worry mind basically finds a million different angles, every angle you could possibly think of, every possibility to be concerned about something, finds a way to say, well, this could happen, or what if this happened, or what if this happened, what if? And, my experience, for example, when I was thinking about what if I harmed my wife, my mind would find different objects that I could use to harm my wife, and it would just immediately find them and say, what if I did it with that? What if I did it with that? What if I did it with the knife? What if I did it with this book, or just whatever? It was crazy. And because of this, you have a reactionary force that is the second mind, and the second mind is called false comfort mind. And now false comfort mind, and this is in the research, by the way, this is backed up by research, this isn't me just making this up. What false comfort mind tries to do is it tries to rationalize with and calm down worry mind, because worry mind is going crazy, or it feels like it's going crazy. And so it will say, well, we've never done anything like that before, why would we do that now? And you're just thinking of something to worry about. But worry mind takes this as almost like a challenge in a weird way to come up with, like, yeah, well, we never did this before, but hey, people go crazy all the time. You hear about totally normal, sane people having violent episodes totally out of the blue. It could happen to us, why not? And so it finds a way to escalate the situation. And so what you get is this like tug of war back and forth that really inflames the situation in your mind, making it bigger and bigger and harder to get out of your mind until you're actually freaking out. And then eventually what happens is that false comfort mind starts getting freaked out by worry mind, and it makes an inlet for worry mind to like make a request. And the request is something like, hey, I'm really freaking out. Maybe we should get out of this situation. If you're worried about harming somebody, for example, a particular person, or doing something you shouldn't to them, then you'll want to get away from that person. And then false comfort mindset eventually says, yeah, you know what? I don't know if we'll act. Maybe we won't. Maybe we will do something crazy. But at the very least, like, this is really uncomfortable and it would feel better just to get out of here. We should get out of here. And so we'll go drive somewhere, or we'll go to the grocery store or something like that. And so what you've done is that you've reinforced the belief in yourself that these thoughts are not just thoughts and that they could lead to something. And it's really important to understand this part, that they could lead to something, because that's what you think. That's how you're wired to think about them. But it's actually false. What you feel like you have when you're dealing with intrusive thoughts is an impulse control problem. And what that means is, like, if you ever stood up next to like a ledge, like really high up, or a balcony or a cliff or something like that, maybe there was like a short railing, maybe there wasn't, and there was probably some part of you that said, oh my God, like I could totally just jump off right now and I would die. I could totally jump off and it would be terrible. And like, wow, I feel so close. I'm like, I don't know, I might actually do it. And you start freaking yourself out and eventually you back away from the ledge. But the truth is, in that moment, you're actually probably less likely to do something like that, to take that step forward, to climb over something, than you would ever be in a normal situation if there wasn't a cliff on the other side. It just feels like the opposite. It feels like you're right on the edge, right about to do it, because you think you have an impulse problem. But actually, the part of the brain that deals with impulse control and the part of the brain that deals with these kinds of anxious thoughts that we're talking about, intrusive thoughts, are actually completely separate parts of the brain. And so you don't have an impulse control problem. It feels like you do, but you don't. In fact, you probably have an over control problem, because you're oversensitized, as we talked about, to this content, these intrusive thoughts. And so it feels like I'm about to do this crazy thing, but you're not about to do that crazy thing. You actually couldn't be further away in many cases from doing that crazy thing. Can I give you a 100% guarantee absolutely you would never do this thing? Of course not. That's not how life works, but I can tell you that it's very unlikely. It's very unlikely, and you don't have an impulse control problem. Almost certainly you do not have an impulse control problem. And so what that means is that we have to, if we want to make progress, we want to get past worry mind, and we don't want to try and rationalize with it using false comfort mind, we have to develop what's known as wise mind, the third mind. And the third mind is essentially, or wise mind, is the mind that can look at this conversation that's playing out between worry mind and between false comfort mind and can say, hey, guys, this is a little nuts. Like, you can see how you're pinging off of each other, you're playing off each other, and you're getting yourselves all worked up about this thing that was really small at the beginning. And of course, we don't have 100% certainty that anything in life may or may not happen, but I think that you're getting a little bit disconnected from the reality of the situation. Okay, and so wise mind is sort of the mindful aspect of yourself, something you could develop through meditation, for example. But I'm going to give you a more direct way to develop this ability to recognize the reality of the situation and begin to calm your nerves and release some of these intrusive thoughts and release their power over you. And it's actually pretty simple. So basically what you're going to do, and this is the strategy that I followed, and it worked really well. It was scary, it was terrifying at first, but then it worked, and it kept getting better and better pretty quickly. And so what you're going to do is you're going to desensitize yourself through exposure to the situation. Perfect example. Let's say that you're afraid you're going to do something crazy with a knife, harm yourself or somebody else. You don't go out of your way to go grab a knife and sit there and stare at it and whatever. I mean, you could, but more like it's better if you go about your day-to-day life and you don't avoid the opportunities to interact with that thing that's frightening you. So if you have to cut some vegetables up, then you don't shy away from that task. You go and you do it. You cut up the vegetables, you put the knife back, and you notice, okay, during this whole time, you do a rating on your anxiety from 1 to 10, and you just keep rating. Okay, my anxiety is at like a 9 right now. I feel like I could really do something crazy. Okay, I'm noticing that right now. Okay, my anxiety is something like a 7 right now. I seem to be calming down, but I'm still a little freaked out. Okay, and you can do this whether it could be a knife. In my case, for example, it was just spending time with my fiance because I was afraid I was going to harm her. And so I would go and cuddle with her and I would be like observing my anxiety level. Okay, I'm starting out, I'm at a 9, I'm freaking out. I could really do something right now. I think I could. It feels like I could. I wasn't going to. And then I kept observing in the moment the anxiety level and would multiple times give it a rating until I was done hanging out in that situation. And typically it would go down. And the more I did that, the more those intrusive thoughts began to seem less serious to me because I began to realize the reality of the situation. Okay, like I've done this multiple times. I've rated my anxiety. It always goes down. And again, I've never done the thing that I was afraid I was going to do. And so I stopped giving power to these thoughts. That is the path. It's through exposure. It's through desensitization to the thoughts themselves until they begin to lose power over you. And you might even find that like you sort of get back into life and relatively soon begin to forget about this because there's other stresses and other things to worry about in your life. I don't doubt that. And it might happen quicker than what you think, even if it's terrifying right now and you can't even imagine it. Though you might need help. You might end up needing to work with a therapist or something like that who is aware of and knows how to treat intrusive thoughts. Otherwise, you could get somebody who like totally causes a backfiring situation and makes it worse for you. Not to scare you, but someone needs to really understand. You should give them resources if you're going to work with them to understand these kind of thoughts. So that is the strategy. And what I want to do now is I want to give you a resource. I want to point you to a resource that is extremely powerful. In fact, it's a book, and if you read the first chapter, you can get it today. You can get it on Amazon Kindle. You can have it digitally immediately from Amazon. And if you get it today, or whenever you get it, just reading the first chapter is going to bring so much relief because you're going to see all this stuff playing out. You're going to see it for what it is. You're going to see you're not alone. You're going to see you're not a monster. You're not a psycho. Those are the opposite of what you are. Really, honestly, those are the opposite of what you are. And you're going to see that, okay, I'm going to get through this. There's a path. Whether I need to work with someone or not, chances are you probably won't. You'll do some reading. You'll start to do some of this work around desensitization. You'll be honest with the people you're around you to let them know what you're going through. So it's not some big terrifying secret in your head, and you're going to get through it. So the book that I want to point you to, you can get it on Amazon, like I said, Kindle or paperback, whatever. It is actually hardcover. I think you can get both. It is Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts, and it's by Sally M. Winston and also by Martin N. Seif, and I originally was brought to this work by Martin Seif. Fantastic book. I think, let's see here, it's $9 on Kindle and $30 on hardcover and like $16 paperback, so well worth it if you're dealing with these kinds of thoughts. And I think that's going to make a world of difference for you. It did for me, and I think it has for a lot of other people as well. Guys, I hope this has been helpful. I would not have made this video had I not been through these experiences myself, and if I just didn't know how scary, how frightening, how terrifying and overwhelming this kind of thought can be, and if I also didn't know that you can get over it, you can get past it. So I hope this has been helpful again, and thank you for watching. Have a great day. We'll see you. Austin Zolkowski, out.